Book 3, Chapter 56, continuing with verse 46. Having arrived in that house, they saw its inside beautifully decorated with garlands of flowers, as fresh as those of the spring season. The palace residents were quietly employed in their duties, and the king's corpse was placed upon a bed of mandara and kunda flowers. Wreaths of the same flowers were strewn over the sheet that covered the body, and there were the auspicious pots of water placed bedside. The doors of the room were closed, and the windows were shut fast with their latches. Lamps cast a dim light on the whitewashed walls, and the corpse was lying as a man in sleep with the suppressed breathing of his mouth and nostrils. There was the bright full moon shining in her delightful luster, and the beauty of the palace would make Indra's palace blush. It was as charming as the center of the lotus of Brahma's birthplace, and it was as silent as dumbness or a dummy itself, and as beautiful as the fair moon in her fullness. Chapter 57, Yogis, Astral Bodies, Phenomena of Dreaming. Vasishta continued. There they saw the younger Leela of Vidaratha, who had arrived there after her death and before the death of that king. She was in her former habit and mode with the same body and the same tone and tenor of her mind. She was also as beautiful in all her features as in her former graceful form and figure when living. She was the same in every part of her body and wore the same clothes as before. She had the same ornaments on her body, with the difference that it was sitting quietly in the same place and not moving about as before. She kept waving her pretty fan over the king's corpse, gracing the ground below like the rising moon, brightening the skies above. She sat quietly, reclining her moon-like face on the palm of her left hand. Decorated with shining gems, she appeared like a bed of flowers blooming with new blossoms. With glances from her beautiful eyes, she shed showers of flowers on all sides. The brightness of her body shone with the beams of the ethereal moon. She approached her lord of men like goddess Lakshmi appears before God Vishnu. And with heaps of flowers around her, she looked like Vasanta Lakshmi. Lakshmi in the aspect of the blissful goddess of spring. Her eyes were fixed on her husband's face, as if she was pondering her future well-being. Thoughts of his present sorrowful state spread a melancholy over her face like that of the waning moon. She saw the maiden who was unable to see them. Their trust was in truth, so they saw everything clearly, while her views being otherwise, she could not discern their spiritual forms. Brahman said, "You have said, O sage, that the first Leela had returned there in her fancy and spiritual form by the favor of the goddess of wisdom. Why do you now describe her as having a body? I want to know how it came to her." Vasishtha replied, "Rama, what is this body of Leela? It is no more than a false imagination of her gross spirit, like that of water in a mirage. It is spirit alone that fills the world, and all bodies are creations of fancy. This spirit is the intellect of God and full of joy in itself. The same understanding which Leela had of herself at her end accompanied her to her future state. The same notion of her body followed her there, even though the body itself was reduced to dust, like ice melted in water. Spiritual bodies are also sometimes liable to fall into error and think themselves to be material bodies, just like we mistake a rope for a serpent. Well, there's some interesting concepts being raised here that we should look at. Leela was standing over the corpse of Siddhartha, in her spiritual body. Now, what is this spiritual body? Well, the spiritual body is, in this case, the pranamaya kosha. And this pranamaya kosha was taking on the form of her former physical body. The pranamaya kosha is capable of being in any form. It doesn't have to take the form of the physical body, but by habit, by concept in the mind of the owner of that body, it will take a particular form. If the owner of that body imagines himself or herself as a certain appearance, that's what the body will look like. And you can prove that to yourself by simply inhabiting your pranamaya kosha and then examining what it looks like by default. What you will see is an image of what you imagine your body to look like. Now we all stand and look in the mirror and we see our physical body. But do we really see it? You know, it's the difference between seeing yourself in the mirror and seeing yourself in a photograph. When you see yourself in a photograph, do you really look like what you look like? Mm-mm. You don't appreciate yourself in the photograph as looking like you. You see yourself in the photograph as looking like someone different, because you have in your mind what you want your body to look like. And when you look in the mirror, you don't see your body truly, you see it through eyes that are running through a filter of desire, what you want your body to look like. And that, what you want your body to look like, is what it's going to look like in the pranamaya question. Kind of an ideal form of you. Verse 16. The belief in anyone's materiality, composed of earth and other elements, is as false as believing rabbits have horns on their heads. Whoever thinks he has become a stag in his dream has no need to seek another stag so that he can compare himself with it. An untruth appears as truth at one time and disappears at another. Just like the error of a snake in a rope vanishes upon the knowledge of its falsehood. So the knowledge of the reality of all things in the minds of the unenlightened is dispersed in the minds of the enlightened upon conviction of their unreality. But the ignorant, who have a belief in the reality of this world of dreams, also believe in the reincarnation of the animal soul, like the revolution of the world on its own axis. So here we see that reincarnation is a belief. It's not a reality. It's an illusion. It's popular to talk about how one is incarnated many thousands of times. In fact, we even speak that there are 4 million species in which one can incarnate into, only one of them being human. And we do this to motivate the ego. The ego is illusory as well, but it is a collection of the karmic traces. And as a collection of the karmic traces, it is a convenient way to gain entry into that realm of karmic traces for the purpose of balancing them. See, we have a peculiar situation, and that is we're trying to extricate ourselves from an illusion, from within the illusion. A little bit like the image in the mirror becoming aware that it is an image in the mirror. And then trying to come out of the mirror Seems a little ridiculous. Like the stuff of cartoons. People have imagined this sort of thing. And they've drawn cartoons of the image in the mirror taking on a life and jumping out of the mirror and running around the room. We're in that situation, literally. We are on one level, an image in the mirror that has become aware of itself as an image in the mirror. How did this happen? How is it possible for the image in the mirror to become aware of itself as the image in the mirror? Only by somehow stepping out or moving away from that captive location of being confined within the mirror. And so as the image in the mirror realizes it is indeed a real thing, not just an image in the mirror, but it has dimensions beyond that belong to it, and it attempts to realize and understand all of its other dimensions. This is where we find ourselves today. We have realized that we're more than an image in the mirror. And now we're seeking to extricate ourselves from this mirror so we can explore more of who we are. Verse 21, Rama asked, if the bodies of yogis are of a spiritual nature, how is it that they are seen walking about in the sight of men? She's to reply, a yogi may take various forms upon himself without the destruction of his former body, like the human soul in a dream may deem itself transformed into a stag or any other being without undergoing any change in its spiritual essence. A yogi's spiritual body is invisible to all, although he may make it appear as visible to their sight. It is like particles of frost seen in sunbeams, and like the appearance of a white spot in autumn sky. Nobody can easily discern the feature of a yogi's body, nor are they discernible by other yogis. They are as imperceptible as the features of a bird flying in the air. It is from the error of judgment that men think some yogis are dead and others living. But their spiritual bodies are never subject to death or common sight. The embodied soul is subject to errors from which the souls of yogis are free, because their knowledge of truth has cleansed the mistake of a snake in the rope from their souls. What is this body and form, and from where does it come? What is its existence or destruction? What is lasting remains forever and is free from the ignorance it had before. Ram said, Does the embodied soul take a spiritual form, or is it something else? Tell me this and remove my doubt. Vashishta said, I have told you this repeatedly, my good Rama. How is it that you do not understand it yet? There exists only the spiritual body, and the material form is nothing. It requires a habit of constant meditation to know your spiritual state and subdue your sense of materiality. As you abstain from your sense of materiality, so you attain the spiritual state. Then there will be an end of your sense of gravity and solidity of objects, like the visions of a dreaming man disappear when he awakens. The body of a yogi becomes as light and subtle as the impermanent appearances in a dream. In his dreaming rambles, a man feels the lightness of his body. Similarly, a yogi finds his solid body is able to fly in all places like air. The expectation of the long life of a master in his material body is realized in the spiritual one after the corpse has been burnt away. Everyone must assume his spiritual frame afterwards, but the yogi finds it in his lifetime by the enlightenment of his consciousness. A man, upon waking from sleep, remembers having an intellectual form in his dream state. So the yogi is conscious of his spiritual body in his own intellect. The notion of the physical body is a mere fallacy, like that of a snake in a rope. There is nothing. Therefore, nothing is lost by the loss of this body, nor is anything gained by its production and regeneration. Brahman said, now tell me, sage, what did the palace residents think the second Leela to be? Did they see her as an embodied being or as a bodiless apparition appearing before them? Vashishta answered, they took the sorrowful queen to be some friend of the king, having come from some place they knew not what or where. They did not like to examine the matter because it is the nature of the ignorant, like that of brutes, to believe what they see without investigation or consideration of its nature. As a stone flung at random flies off from its mark, so brutish and ignorant folks go astray from hiding the true mark of a thing placed before them. We know not what becomes of the bodies of our dream, or where they go when we awaken. Such is the case of our material bodies, that are as false and fleeting as are the lucid dreams. Brahman said, "Tell me, sage, where does a hill that we dream of or hide upon our waking? Kindly remove my doubts, like the wind disperses the clouds of autumn." Vasishtha said, "All things that appear in dream or reside in our dreams, such as a hill or the like, are absorbed in the consciousness from where they sprang. It's like the motion of bodies subsides in the air that gives them vibration. As the motion of the air mixes with the fixed ether, so dreams and desires set in the unchanging soul from where they arose. Our dreams, like our knowledge of all other things, are made known to us by our consciousness, the nature of which is unknown to us as that of the inner soul. We do not find our dreams or desires to be distinct from our awareness of them. They appertain to it in the same way as fluidity to water and motion to air. Whatever difference may appear to exist between dreams and our awareness of them is the effect of sheer ignorance. This gross ignorance is the characteristic of this world, known as the phantom of fancy. It is impossible to conceive of two co-eternal and co-existent causes together. So it is wrong to suppose the dream as a distinct existence or anything other than an act of our consciousness. There is no difference whatever between the dreaming and waking states. In dream, we see a false city appearing to view. In waking, you behold the real world standing as a reality before you. Nothing can be truly existent that appears true in a dream. This being always true of what is seen in a dream. It is likewise so of external phenomena that we see in our daydreams. As a hill in a dream immediately disappears into nothing, so the material world sooner or later disappears into nothing by thinking on its nothing. So this is an important statement. There is no difference whatever between the dreaming and waking states. It's something we can relate to. We know by now that dreams are just illusions created in our mind. And they're rather private illusions. Someone else, our spouse, or a friend that lives down the street, they can't see into our dreams. They don't have the same dream we have. And so it's reasonable to us to know that dreams are illusions. Why? Because we can reflect on the dream from a higher state of consciousness. When we're embedded in the dream, it's not a lucid dream It's a different story, isn't it? If you're having a regular dream, analyze your thinking of the reality of the dream within that dream. And you will realize that while you're having this dream in your mind and you're not lucid, you're not observing or witnessing from a higher state of consciousness, then you are in full belief that the dream is real, that you are in this situation, whatever it is, being chased by a monster, falling off a cliff, talking to someone who's been dead for 30 years. It all seems very normal and reasonable and real if you're not able to observe it from a higher state of consciousness. Then we come to waking state. As long as we're not able to observe waking state from the silent witness, totally real. As soon as we become the silent witness, however, it's a whole different. It is literally like a lucid dream. We're seeing the world more akin to its reality as an illusion. And we're witnessing it from the originator of that illusion. This is the beginning of self-realization. It's like a lucid dream is the beginning of self-realization. Why people are so fascinated with lucid dreams. Because then they're beginning to see, if I just distance myself, my perspective, come out of the dream and observe it from higher state of consciousness, changes everything. Same thing in waking state. That's why we spend so much time connecting with and becoming the silent witness. During the process of our meditation, the whole activity of the meditation takes on a dreamlike quality, doesn't it? Thinking of sutras, the expressions that arise in the mind, the visions, the experiences. These are all products of our own consciousness being exercised. Verse 53. Some see a yogi arising in the air, others as a dead body lying on the ground. This is according to one's belief in his spiritual or material body. Everyone sees him in his own way. The view of the phenomenal world as distinct from the unity is as false as seeing a delusion or a magic show, or a dream or a delirium of the great illusion. Others who are blinded by similar errors, after being awakened from cessation of physical senses at death, entertain the notion of their reproduction as in a dream, but the spiritual body of the yogi shines and soars upward, after passing over the mirage of the false appearances of the world. Chapter 58. The two Leelas see Padma revived. Vashishta continued. Meantime, the goddess of wisdom stopped the course of Vidaratha's life, like we stop the flight of our minds at will. Leela said, "Tell me, goddess, how much time has elapsed since the corpse of the king was laid in his tomb, and I was absorbed in my deep meditation?" The goddess replied, "A month has passed since these, your maidservants, have been waiting here watching your body, which they thought lay asleep in the room. Dear excellent lady, what has become of your body after a fortnight, when it became rotten and evaporated in the air? Seeing your lifeless corpse, as cold as frost lying on the ground, and turning as dry as a log of wood, or rather as a withered leaf on the floor, the royal ministers thought you had committed suicide and removed your putrid carcass out of the room. What more shall I say? Then they laid your corpse on a heap of sandalwood, and having set fire to the pyre with a sprinkling of ghee, they quickly reduced it to ashes. Then the family raised a loud cry that their queen was dead. They wept bitterly for some time, after which they performed your funeral ceremonies. Now when they see you coming here in your same body, you must be astonished and think you have returned from the next world of the dead. Now, my daughter, when you appear before them in your pure and spiritual form, they must look upon you with astonishment. For you have not your former form at present, but it is changed to a purer one, agreeably to the desire and temperament of your mind. For everyone sees everything outside himself according to his inner feelings, for example. The sight of shadowy ghosts is frequent to children who have a fear of devils at heart. Now, O beautiful lady, you are an adept in spiritualism, and you have a spiritual body on you. You have forgotten and forsaken your former body and all the desires coexisting with it. Those who see spirit do not see material bodies. Their intelligent view is to see material bodies in the light of autumn clouds, which are void of substance. Upon attainment of the spiritual state, a material body becomes like an empty cloud, or like a flower without its fragrance. When a man of pure desire is conscious of his attainment of the spiritual state, he loses the memory of his material body, like a youth forgets his embryonic state. It is now the 31st day that we have arrived at this place, and I have caused these maidservants to fall into a deep sleep this morning. Now, Leela, let us go before the willful Leela and use of our will to let her discover the form of the truthful Leela and see how she behaves toward you. But she's to say. So saying, they wish themselves to be perceived by the willful Leela, and stood before her in their ethereal forms of goddess and her inspired dame. At this instant, the Leela of Vidaratha looked at them with staring eyes and found the room lighted up by the full luster of her body. The apartment seemed to be lighted by the bright orb of the moon, and its walls seemed washed with liquid gold. The ground floor shone as if paved with ice, and all was full of splendor. So this is an interesting perspective to give us a look into how spiritual beings, such as our Acharya Devata Guru, for example, could literally appear in front of us as if in a physical body. Quite possible for them to do this simply by desiring to do this. Now, they would only desire to do this for a deeper purpose, because these are enlightened beings. Saraswati is running this show. Saraswati is an enlightened spiritual being. The Shakti of the creator of the universe, Brahman. Saraswati is illusory, of course, from another perspective. But from the perspective of the inhabitants of the three-dimensional physical world, Saraswati is quite real. But not real in a sense that she's part of the 3D world, unless she wills herself to be. But as an enlightened being, there is a certain constraint. I thought enlightenment was freedom from all constraints. Well, it is, but in a sense it is not. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, when one achieves moksha, then everything that one does is in alignment with divine karmic traces. So therein lies the constraint. Saraswati, or your Acharya Devata, are in that category. they have to do and can only do that which is in alignment with divine karmic traces. This is all they can do. And so if the divine karmic traces are in alignment with them appearing in physical form, then they will. Otherwise, they will not. It's not that they make a decision to appear in physical form. They had no decision to make. It seems that Saraswati is making a decision to appear in a physical form to see how the willful Leela, as it says here in verse 18, will behave towards you. Why are they interested in this even? Of what value is knowing how the willful Leela will behave? We'll talk about that more in a subsequent chapter.